Now we know we exist. Yeah, welcome everybody to a return to Mahamudra for the people. It's good to see everybody. I love that Shabkar background. Melissa, thank you.
You recognized him. Isn't that gorgeous?
Yes, yeah.
I'll send you the image. It's from the cover of a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Good. Well, it's nice to be here with everybody. You can do whatever you like in terms of keeping your camera on or off, whatever feels good. And so I have been, and that wasn't me telling you to put your camera. Also, like if you wanted to be off, that's fine. Yeah. So it's been a while actually. I think not since August that we've had this. During that time, I've been away a bit. I was in Sikkim and Bhutan, and then India, and then Atlanta, and then California. And it's really nice to be back with all of you. And I was thinking that since we are back in this way, maybe this is a little bit of a kind of restart moment for Mahamudra practice. And what I was thinking of doing today is, maybe we could begin with going over the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje's Mahamudra aspiration prayer with periodic breaks, right? So a little bit of text, a little bit of commentary, a little bit of practice, a little bit of text, a little bit of commentary, a little bit of practice. And I am also the kind of person who is totally fine and happy with extemporaneous questions. And, so I want to just go ahead and say, if you feel the need to ask a question or get clarification or whatever, you can go ahead and raise your hand if you want to speak, or you can put a question in the text box, and I'll try and just attend to these as we go in a way that flows. Does that sound like a reasonable place for us to begin? Okay, yeah, good. Eric is burning the Palo Santo for us so that we're all cleansed. Thank you, Eric. But I was thinking that maybe we could start off with just 10 minutes of sitting, just as a way of stabilizing. So get as comfortable as you can. So this, and again, just listen to your body, whatever your body is telling you. So you can sit in a chair, you can sit, on a meditation cushion, you can lay down. Allow your body to settle in a way that feels comfortable. And very briefly, kind of going through an informal version of the 7-point postures of Virachana, with your legs cross-legged or as cross-legged as you can make them, if that's comfortable. Your hands can be on your knees or in meditation mudra, kind of down on your lap. It's typically said that it's a nice thing to have your shoulders kind of open as if they were the wings of a vulture gliding through space. So just, basically chest a little open and soft. Neck just slightly down a little bit, slightly hooked. You can either have your gaze downward or directly in front of you, whichever you prefer. Allow yourself to breathe naturally. Don't clench your jaw. Right? Let your the text say, you can just keep your basically so that your teeth are barely kind of touching, but don't obsess. Just allow your jaw to feel comfortable. And then we'll sit like this for 10 minutes. I will give a little instruction just with respect to placing the mind Allow your mind to be relaxed in this moment, trying to let go of the past. So everything prior to this moment. Letting go in this moment of the future. So anything that we have to do later, or even the next moment, what's coming next, just try and let that go. And then try and let go of any particular ideas or pressure or conceptualization around this moment, the present. Try and allow yourself to let go of needing to control anything or make anything happen. And settle yourself in this relaxed, spacious way. And slowly bring yourself back to the group. And we'll come back to meditation in a little bit. So the translation of the Mahamudra aspiration prayer by third Karmapa that I'm using is by Nalanda Bodhi translations. So I'm just sharing this with you all now. So that's called Songs and Instructions of the Karmapas. It's a nice book. Not too, what is it? It's like 84 pages. And it has various things by various Karmapas. So the third Karmapa is a like a dear love of mine. He's just kind of an interesting historical personality. With him, the whole Tulku tradition began in Tibet. So prior to the third Karmapa, it was a little bit of somewhat commonplace practice, in the early days of Vajrayana for people to venerate their teachers as if they're the reincarnation of some person who lived before. Like, oh, they must be the reincarnation of Nagarjuna or the reincarnation of one of the Buddha's direct disciples, for example. But with Rongjung Dorje, this is the first time that we have somebody who, so there's the first Karmapa, Dusum Kempa, and the second Karmapakshi. So Karmapakshi said, I am the reincarnation of Dusum Kempa. And then Rongjung Dorje, as a young boy, apparently said, I am the reincarnation of Karmapakshi. And so this is what kind of, started the whole thing, the Tulku tradition. So, since then, we see the Tulku tradition in many, of the Vajrayana lineages. And then in some of them, there are family lineages too. So like you find this in the Sakya tradition, there are kind of these two threads, right? There's this kind of monastic reincarnation-based lineage, and then there's also the Kon family transmission system. And then Nyingma tradition also, it's not uncommon to find these family transmission systems. So anyway, I wanted to just mention that. And then, Karmapa, third Karmapa, really had some of the best teachers in Tibet at the time. He was very close with Longchenpa. This is a great Dzogchen teacher, author of the Choyun Zod, amongst many other things. So they were close contemporaries. They shared a Dzogchen teacher, Kumaradza, and his teacher for much of the early Kagyu literature was Urgen Rinchen Pao, or Genpa, who's also quite an amazing teacher. He was also contemporary of Dopopa, right? So the kind of the progenitor of the Shengtong view system. He's also a great master of the Kala Chakra Tantra. So he was pretty cool. There's just all these great people in Tibet at the time who are laying, amazing, foundations for practices and lineages that would last hundreds of years, all, going on at this time. And everything was a little new and a little, it was kind of like 80s hip hop, that world where everybody was, there's excitement, there's a buzz, there was, this like creativity in the air, the sense of, oh, where's this going to go? So in a very real way, like that time period was dynamically rich, and then also politically really unstable too, which adds to the whole intensity of what was going on. And then of course, the importance of Dharma, right? When there's political instability, Dharma, whatever kind of Dharma one might be attracted to, can be a real supportive and nurturing balm when it seems like things are falling apart. But that's a different class. So I'm gonna go through a couple of these stanzas. Maybe I'll do the first 5, and then we'll sit and meditate together. And of course, I'm going to go through this slowly. I'm going to look down at the text, which is why I'm looking down. And again, feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat box if you have any questions as we go. So this is the aspiration prayer for Mahamudra, the definitive meaning, by the third Karmapa Rangjung Dorje. And it begins, Namo Guru, right? So homage to the Guru. Lamas, yidams, and deities of the mandala, victorious ones and your children of the 10 directions and 3 times. Please hold us in your great loving kindness and bless our aspiration prayers that they may be perfectly fulfilled. So this is just this beginning, setting the scene, so to speak, this invocation of lamas, yidams, and deities of the mandala. Why these kinds of invocations, so to speak, happen is basically from this, understanding that we can't do this alone, right? That the just as much as in some cases people feel direct connection to their own, like, for example, family ancestral lineage, right? This is kind of like a spiritual ancestral lineage. So our teachers, right, the yidams, right? So these meditation deities who exist in often in Sambhogakaya form, right? The energy of Dharma, right? All of the deities of the mandalas. So right now it's kind of a little bit of a dreary day in Brooklyn, right? So energy is low, right? So I might find myself calling upon all my lamas or gurus or teachers, all of the yidams I feel connected to, all of the mandala deities to please bless me with freshness, right? Bless me with the ability to be easy. The victorious ones in your children. So this is all the Buddhas of the 10 directions and 3 times. So every single direction, right, in the past, present, and future. Hold us with your loving kindness and bless our aspiration prayers, right? So bless us so that this, and not only the practice of Dharma, but our the desire to have this thing completely play out fully, right? That we will each arise completed, right? Bless us so that this can happen, right? And it's helpful from time to time to open up to this being not only a possibility, but to imagine that we are being receiving the investiture of the blessings of all of these beings. It's important to take ourselves seriously, and this is a way of laying the foundation for that. The text goes on. May the rivers of my own and all limitless beings, gathered virtue, undefiled by the 3 spheres that spring from the snow mountain of our completely pure intentions and actions, flow into the ocean of the victorious one's 4 kayas. So here he's saying that may the rivers of all of our virtue, right? So all the practice, all of the whether it's formal practice or informal practice off the cushion, and all of your study, all of your dedication, may all of these come together, right? Undefiled by past, present, and future activities, right? So fresh, right? So may they spring from the snow mountain of our completely pure intentions and actions and flow into the ocean of the victorious one's 4 kayas, all these numbers. So the 4 kayas are the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and Svabhavikaya. So the Dharmakaya is really kind of like, the ultimate nature of enlightened mind itself, right? Dharma Dhatu. Right? We could say that the Sambhogakaya is kind of like the energy body, so to speak, this energetic quality of all of the Buddhas. Right? So we have like, the vastness of primordial space, right? Totally, imbued with primordial purity, right? This is our real essence, right? Sambhogakaya is this kind of, energy body, so to speak, the constant capability of being able to arise to meet circumstances, which connects directly to the Nirmanakaya, which is kind of the much more physically embodied ability to do this. I'd say that Sambhogakaya is kind of like the essence of the inception of our awakening, right? And all of the ways that sparks activity happens through the Nirmanakaya. And then the Svabhavikaya is a combination of all of these. It's the essence, it's primordial isness. So may all of our, accumulated virtues come together in this way, right? So that we can manifest these four bodies of the Buddhas. And why is this important? This is important because you have to know what you're doing. You have to have a goal, and this is the goal, right? The goal is complete awakening, right? And the goal is complete awakening. When do we want it? We want it now, right? Why do we want it? We want it so that we can liberate, of course, ourselves and all sentient beings, right? Beings, and even lately, the term sentient beings is kind of limited, right? Because what about beings without sentience, right? We just, it's fascinating how sometimes our practice of Buddhism is almost limited by our own very humanness, right? So we have sentience, so we preference sentient beings. So what about, trees and rocks and, lumps of metal? I just look at a fire escape. What about the fire escapes of the universe, right? What about it's very interesting to kind of wonder about all of our assumptions, right? And we assume that, fire escapes don't have any kind of consciousness or something, but maybe they do, right? Maybe there's a deep, subtle energy in them. But so the largeness of this, though, is really the largeness of what Buddhahood is, right? Buddhahood is transcends time, transcends space, transcends culture, transcends intellect, right? So transcends the way we're used to relating to things. So in kind of, the view of that, moving into especially our practice of Mahamudra with this kind of sense of the fact that we're moving into something that is vast and powerful, and perhaps something that at this particular time we're not going to be able to understand so well, but we still show up in order to keep going. So this third stanza. So in all future lifetimes, for as long as it may be until we attain enlightenment, may not even the words negative action or suffering be heard. And may we enjoy the glory of oceans of virtue and happiness. And so just looking here at all of the Zoom boxes, all of these faces and names, right? So may none of you or myself or anybody who happens to watch this recording in the future experience suffering or no suffering or no non-virtue, right? And it's not because, we don't want to be sinners, right? That's not the reason. It's because, essentially, we want everyone to be able to show up fully awakened. And we're training from this moment on to be fully awakened. So may all of us move along this path. May all of us move along this path with ease and with beauty, with joy, and in an artful way. And then may we enjoy the glory of the oceans of virtue and happiness, right? May we all be happy. Everybody here, everybody looking at this in the future. May each one of us be happy. Right? Like feel that in our hearts. And this is part of what, showing up for Sangha means, right? Really showing up, desiring this. In all of our lifetimes, may we gain the supreme freedoms and resources and have faith, joyous diligence, and prajna. May we rely on excellent spiritual teachers, and having received the nectar of their instructions, may we practice accordingly and encounter no obstacles in doing so. May we always practice the genuine Dharma. So in all of our lifetimes, may we gain the supreme freedoms and resources. May each one of us here be completely free. When we begin to wonder about supreme freedom, right? Supreme. Again, this is like getting out of our head, getting out of all of our assumptions, getting out of all of our languaging. This is kind of where even Buddhism fails, right? Like, we're going to go further and further right into this experience that's beyond language. But not only may we have these supreme freedoms, resources, right? So may we be resourced, right? And have faith, joyous diligence, not this kind of like, self-flagellating, like, oh, I got to meditate because I suck, kind of thing. Like, yes, this is my mind and it is amazing. It is out of control. And that's amazing. Color is amazing. Sound is amazing. Taste is amazing. I'm going to have a sip of my tea, which is amazing. Breathing is amazing. Being embodied. Right? Everything. Right? This is, at least for this series of Mahamudra for the people, right? This is really about loving ourselves and all of this, right? This is not a tight practice, right? We don't walk into this with this tight-fisted, stingy kind of view, right? This is really like, opening our hearts kind of practice. May we rely on excellent spiritual teachers, right? So all of them, right? All of them. There are so many. And having received the nectar of their instructions, may we practice accordingly and encounter no obstacles in doing so, right? So we're starting off super positive. May we all experience no obstacles, right? Just showing up for one another in this way, like, having gratitude for everyone, having a sense of certainty in the power. I have a sense of certainty in the power of your practice, right? May it be power. And may we always practice the genuine Dharma, right? And so then one will ask, well, which one is the genuine one? And I'm not going to go there. But I will venture to bet that the one that frees you is the genuine one, right? That which liberates your mind, right? And so this is what you need to pay attention to, right? This is not for me to say, oh, do this one and don't do that one. Know your mind. Be invested in the liberation of your own mind. Right?
Just gonna chime in with an amen on that one.
Yay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. And we could do all sorts of things. But literally, like, and I've gone through this. I'm sure Rod has had this experience too. Anybody who participates in an organized religion, right? Like, Buddhism can be, you get sucked into like, oh, this is the right way. That other way is not so right, right? But the one thing that I've seen is there are so many right ways, and it's not really anyone's. I don't know. No benefit in me kind of parsing out that kind of stuff, right? So we all know where we come from, right? We know what's alive for us. Most likely, most of us who are here were not necessarily born practicing Dharma. Maybe somebody was, and that's wonderful. But so if it's the case that you're coming as a quote unquote convert, then there's also, everything that predates quote unquote the appearance of your connection to Dharma. And so on one level, that's, connecting to your spirituality when you were a child, right? What was alive, right? Or as a teenager or as a young adult, wherever you find yourself now. And then within the context of the Vajrayana tradition, I think this is really important to remember too, is that our spiritual path didn't begin when we were born. Our spiritual path began a long, long time ago. No. So it began lifetimes ago, hundreds of lifetimes ago, maybe thousands of lifetimes ago, right? So we will often just look at our life, and I was talking with somebody not too long ago. It was like, I just formally started practicing 10 years ago, and this person's in their 60s. They're like, I really have a small window. And I was like, well, I think probably it goes back much further. Like, so you can relax. Don't put so much pressure on yourself about this last seeming 10 years, Maybe you're already there, who knows? Or maybe you're right on the edge, right? But the point is, right, is like sometimes our biggest limitation is the way we conceptualize things, right? And so if we say, oh, my life only began when I practiced Dharma, well then, that's a small window. But if you're willing to accept the fact that, if anybody here who is connected, I mean, I do feel this way. Anybody here who is connected with, Mahamudra, even if it's the first time you're hearing about Mahamudra, means you have a previous relationship to that, right? And if you have a previous relationship to that, there's a good likelihood that that goes back far, 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 far. So this is the fifth stanza. So after this one, maybe we'll pause and we'll sit in meditation for 10 minutes. So this fifth one is, listening to the scriptures and reasonings frees us from the obscurations of ignorance. Reflecting on the key instructions vanquishes the darkness of doubt. Meditation's light illuminates the true nature just as it is. May the brilliance of the three kinds of wisdom increase. Right? So, basically, this is a pointing out of these three different modes, right, that are important. And what's even more important is being non-preferential, or, to play with people, being polyamorous with these three different modes, right? Loving all three of these, right? Openly, freely, with ease, and without any attachment. So listening to the scriptures and reasoning frees us from the obscurations of ignorance. Right? And so depending on even how we like those words, scriptures, that can get loaded for people, but basically reflecting on Dharma text, right? It could be anything, right? It could be this particular song. It could be, Lama Rod's writing. It could be sutras. It could be tantras. It could be spiritual biographies, right? But this piece of listening to scripture and reasoning frees us from the obscurations of ignorance. So to some extent, there is this, we as animals, right? We're animals just like every other animal. And we're animals that have this, really developed ability to reason, right? And create and intellectualize. So there's a part of us that really kind of benefits from this, right? So re-familiarizing ourselves with Dharma concept, right? So not in a way to get attached to, but to again, reflect on the Dharma. The second being, meditation's light illuminates the true nature just as it is. So study without meditation gets all wonky, right? So meditation is really where the the rubber meets the road, and where things are distilled, right? We can become very familiar with a particular kind of meditation instruction intellectually, and that's good. But what's even better is to actually begin to practice it. And as we practice it, and we practice through our dullness, or through our agitation, or through our giddiness, through our excitement, through our sadness, through our exhaustion, whatever we're feeling, right? But just sticking with it, this is the thing that allows us to begin to distill a very profoundly real wisdom. And we can say that this is a wisdom that's self-born, right? That's self-born because it arises through you, through your experience. And this kind of wisdom is the kind that you will always be able to rely on because it authentically arose from you. Oh, and I'm going out of order. I apologize. So the second, that was the third one. The second one is reflecting on the key instructions vanquishes the darkness of doubt. So reflecting on these key instructions. So the first meditation instruction we did was Tulipa's 6 nails. And I first was taught this Tulipa's 6 nails in 1995. And I this is one of my main practices actually over all this time. Right? These instructions come from the Mahasiddha Tulopa, and it's kind of this distillation of Mahamudra. Right? So let go of the past. Let go of the future. To let go of the present. To let go of needing to control anything. Letting go of needing to figure anything out. Make anything happen. And resting. Just relaxing and resting. And I could say over, however many years it is from 1995 until now, like this has been one of my main practices, and the decades of reflecting on my relationship to letting go of the past. Right? Like why is this important to do? It's important to do because like over all of that time, for example, like I've had 3 kids, right? So there's letting go of the past in relationship to revisiting becoming a parent, in these different ways. I had my relationship with my eldest son's mother, dissolved and fell apart in a very dramatic way, right? A long time ago. But so letting go of the past in relationship to that, again, as a parent, very basic, like, seemingly ordinary thing. The future, right? When am I going to be free? Or like, what is my, child going to be like? Or what is my role going to be like? Or, whatever, right? Letting go of the future. Or, I used to work in hospice. So sitting with hospice patients and really feeling into just for myself. And then, when people wanted to go there, what does it mean to let go of your past when you're at the end of life, right? The things that you really need to let go of. Right? And then what does it mean to let go of anxiety about what may come next? And not controlling. This is a real hard one. Not controlling. What does that mean? So over the course of, a couple of decades, reflecting on what does it mean to not control this moment? And we all have different relationships to control, right? The need to control. And then to not figure anything out. This was an interesting one, maybe working at Rikers, right? How do you figure out all that suffering? You can't, right? You can take positions, you can do all this stuff, right? But all it is one big wave of pain and horror. Being open to that, not figuring it out, witnessing it. And then, of course, the hardest one of all of these, relax, rest and relax, right? It's definitely great. I love that. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Kind of instruction, but it is hard to do. Let me tell you, I can't tell you how many people I've met who are like, I can't relax my mind. I gotta be doing something. Even in my practice, I need to be doing. Yeah. Right. So I'm just sharing that one in relationship to this point, right? Reflecting on the key instructions vanquishes the darkness of doubt. So coming back to something like this over the course of 20-something years, right? So simple and so basic becomes, you could write volumes and volumes and volumes on one's own relationship to each one of these key points. And it's not that we're special because we could write volumes and volumes and volumes. It's every single being who encounters this over time, right? And what's most important is that we return to these periodically. And as we do, everything deepens. Right. So these 3 points, Rongjung Dorje is really kind of, offering us a very helpful approach. So listen to scriptures and reasoning so that you can be freed from the obscurations of ignorance. Reflect on the key instructions so that you can vanquish the darkness of doubt. And meditation offers the illumination of the mind's true nature just as it is. Right? May the brilliance of these 3 kinds of wisdom increase. So maybe here we can timer and we can sit for, again, 10 minutes. So allow yourself to come into a meditative posture, however you like. Let your body relax. And again, if you want to use Philippa's 6 nails as a guide, you can do that. Letting go of the past. Letting go of the future. Letting go of this particular moment. Any pressure around that. Not controlling. Don't try and figure anything out. Just rest, relax. slowly bring myself back to group. Take a moment to just notice what that was like. So perhaps we can do 2 more stanzas and then sit again one last time. And if there are any questions, oh yeah, Melissa, do you have a question?
Yes, briefly, did you mean now or towards the end? Whatever's best for everyone.
Oh, if it's burning, we can do
No.
it. No, okay, yeah. If it's not burning, then I'll do these 2 stanzas and we'll sit for a bit, and then we'll have maybe 10 minutes or so for questions. So the 6th stanza is the 2 truths free from the extremes of realism and nihilism are the reality of the ground. And through the supreme path, the 2 accumulations free from the extremes of superimposition and denial, the fruition that accomplishes the 2 benefits free from the extremes of existence and peace is attained. May we meet with this Dharma that is flawless and sure. So the 2 truths are ultimate and relative truth, right? Ultimate truth being, the fundamental awakening that undergirds all things, our Buddha nature, the fact that all of us are inherently perfected in our natural state. And then the relative truth is, the kind of much more relative experience, right? Most of us didn't wake up as Buddhas. Hopefully somebody here did. Right, and we struggle with the world around us, with the relative functioning of the world around us, politics, getting stuff done, as it were. Loud sounds in Brooklyn, many different kinds of things, right? And so the 2 truths free from extremes of realism and nihilism are the reality of the ground, right? So this is interesting, this translation, free from the extremes of realism, so it would be eternalism. And but maybe this is good, right? Extremely real, so real. It's so real, it's right here, right? In a way, that is this kind of like, eternalism and nihilism. Oh, nothing exists. Oh, what are you so upset about? Your suffering doesn't even exist, kind of thing. So free from these 2 extremes, right? So the 2 truths, ultimate and relative, free of these extremes of eternalism and nihilism, are the reality of the ground, reality of the ground, the basis of all of this. And what's also important here is this ultimate and relative is, informs the ground, right? Which means that there's always this kind of ebb and flow of the ultimate purity of everything. And then, of course, on a relative level, needing to address languaging, needing to address structural oppression, for example, or including structural oppression. Included within that, we could say patriarchy, right? Every other thing that is in need of addressment, right? Everything that is in need of aiding other beings so that they can move along towards awakening with dignity, with freedom, with resilience, resourcefulness, or resourceness. All of this, right? But this, what is interesting here is that this ultimate and relative kind of tension or play is part of the ground, right? And so I'm sure everybody here has had some kind of experience where you have this profound clarity in your practice, and then you kind of go outside and you see how messed up the world is. Right? And you're like, okay, like how does this work? You know, so that is part of the ground, right? That is part of the work. That is part of what it means to be engaged in our practice. Through the supreme path, the two accumulations, free of the extremes of superimposition and denial, the fruition that accomplishes the two benefits, free from the extremes of existence and peace, is attained. Right? So these two benefits are the benefit to self and other, right? And the two accumulations are similarly kind of situated, right? So how to be able to connect to the Dharma in this way that is a balance, right? Perhaps you could say harmonize the harmonization between ultimate and relative. Yeah, I know that all of us are suffering, and all of us have gone through intense periods of our suffering, and it's natural in those moments of intense visceral personal suffering to want to float off into the ultimate, right? And just, it's almost like you're high kind of thing, right? And we need that sometimes, right? But we can't just be there, right? Because then there's no language, there's no ability to communicate, there's no structure, right? Structure is ultimately a compassionate thing, right? When done well, right? And so having a relationship to the relative, maybe we could say being like Mercury or Hermes, right? The messenger of the gods, who could go, talk to the gods, and then go down to the underworld and go back and forth, right? There's some power in that, right? And there's some power in, maybe we could say, embodying Mercury in our practice, but then also embodying this Mercury-like quality of being able to flow between the benefit of self and other, right? If we're only giving to others at the expense of ourselves, that's not particularly skillful. And if we're only practicing for ourselves, we'll be like, after all of this, I will then give you Dharma. Like, that's not so good either, right? There has to be this balance, this flow, right? And with accumulation too, the accumulation of merit and wisdom. If we're going to just accumulate wisdom, that's like, downloading. I have all this stuff, right? But then there's also practicing it, right? And there's the accumulation of merit as well, which is external in nature, right? Creating the causes and conditions for the benefit of others, right? So all of this needs to be balanced. When it is balanced, then, this last line, may we meet with the Dharma that is flawless and sure, right? That balance is what makes it flawless, right? If I'm like, man, check me out, like, check out all my Dharma, check out all my Dharma books, check out my private jet, check out all this stuff. After, like, I get my Rolls Royce, then, I'll teach you. That's a big problem. But I'm sure everybody can see that. So then the last stanza here is a nice place to end too, as far as the text goes today. So the base of purification is mind itself, the union of clarity and emptiness. May the great purifying Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra clear away what is to be purified, the fleeting stains of confusion. And may we manifest the result of this purification, stainless Dharmakaya. So the base, or in another translation, they say basis of purification, right? The arena, as it were, where all of this is happening is mind. And so this is not a world called mind. This is our own mind, right? Our own experience, right? If you take a moment to just allow yourself to settle your mind and rest into a meditative state, this is the ground. This is the basis. This is the battlefield, right? What this place is, what is this mind? It is the union of clarity and emptiness. Clarity in the sense that there is this knowing quality, right? This awareness, right? When our mind has a vividness to it, right? That is the clarity component. And yet when we look for this with specificity as to where everything is in our experience of mind, it can't be found. Right? This is the emptiness piece. Right, so our mind is the unification of clarity and emptiness. Right, the constancy of the experience of whatever it is that we're going through, whether I go downstairs and go outside into this gray, now rainy day in Brooklyn and experience that, right? Experience the noise, experience the rain, experience the cold, right? And then rest into meditation, and all or any kind of reactive thoughts, all preferencing, all of this, right? That is the ground of practice. And when I can let go into ease, this union of clarity and emptiness is able to be experienced. May the great purifying Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra clear away what is to be purified, the fleeting stains of confusion. And so fleeting stains of confusion, often other times translated as adventitious stains, right? They're fleeting in the sense that they don't last forever, thank God, right? They're fleeting. Sometimes all we need to do is look for their source and they actually dissolve, right? They're sometimes translated as adventitious. Here, they're fleeting stains of confusion. In these other translations, and kind of rooted in this essay I was reading over the weekend, this use of the term adventitious actually goes all the way back to the Pali, to the Buddha themselves, who supposedly said that all obscuration, mental obscuration, is adventitious and temporary. Right? Why is it adventitious? It's adventitious because it allows us to notice, release, and experience insight as a result. Right? Its very nature allows us to be able to rest into the nature of mind. And so this is kind of like not hating on ourselves for having emotion, right? We could say, oh God, I wish I didn't have emotion, but what would you be? You would be like a lump of clay, right? There's not a lot of wisdom in that, right? When we know our anger and we know our love and we know our intensity and all of this stuff, then we also know the wisdom and the power within our being, right? But if we fail to even let that exist, right, we're repressing, we're suppressing, we're denying, the beauty in all of this. And so with all of our obscurations, right, all the places we get stuck, all of our conceptual limitations, all of our habituation, right, all of this is clarified and purified by resting into the clarity, emptiness of mind, and these fleeting stains dissolve. And then the last line is, may we manifest the result of this purification, stainless Dharmakaya. Right? And so this is the recognition of the vast purity of mind itself. So maybe we can just sit for 2 minutes. I'm sorry, 5 minutes. I'm losing my mind. That's how enlightened I am. And we'll just settle. And again, actually now for this session, if it's helpful, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and let go of needing to do anything, let go of a slow build-up where we're doing this a little fast, let go of needing to figure anything out, relax. And now, allow yourself to settle into this union of clarity and emptiness. A mind which is vivid, perhaps vivacious, And yet when you look, it's hard to find it. So rest into this sneaky, vivacious quality of your mind. Slowly allow yourself to come back to the group. And sometimes these shorter sessions are really helpful because they force us a little bit to get comfortable with getting comfortable in a short period of time, right? And maybe if what everybody says is true about our mind being primordially pure and this union of clarity and emptiness, then perhaps we don't need this long descent, right, into stability of practice. Maybe it could be done like that, right? Give yourself the opportunity for it to be that way. So anyway, I want to see if there are any questions. Or really serious concerns. Yeah, Melissa.
I have a very simple intellectual question, but these teachers are amazing. It's so wonderful you're back. I'm so glad that you were spreading Dharma and seeing your guru and all that. And tell your Dakini wife, I think she's amazing to be married to a teacher. These teachings are so great. This translation, I think, is so wonderful. I don't speak Tibetan, but I feel like it's really capturing the poetry of this text, and that's not always captured in translations. But the only question I have is, you mentioned that the third Karmapa was a contemporary of Dampopa, and you mentioned what was it, the Shangyang view?
Oh,
Maybe you've mentioned this before, but I don't know. What is that?
Yeah. So yeah, he was a contemporary of Dolpopa. What was his name? Dolpopa.
Dampopa.
Dolpopa. So
Dolpopa.
yeah, so Dolpopa was a early Kalachakra master, and the technical founder of the Jonangpa. And the name of the book should and so okay. So the so with Dolpopa, and this gets a little complicated, but in a nutshell, Dolpopa did a lot of Kalachakra practice. Dolpopa supposedly went to Shambhala, so the kingdom of Shambhala is sacred to Kalachakra Tantra, and met with what are known as the Kalkin emperors of Shambhala in this kind of visionary state. Interestingly enough, in Kalachakra, there's this practice of dark retreat. And in this practice of dark retreat and all of the kind of, heavy duty Kalachakra Tantra practice that he did, Dolpopa espoused the view that essentially the mind has characteristics, right? And these characteristics are things such as clarity, luminosity, emptiness, right? Emptiness itself is a characteristic, and awareness, though. This is kind of the big thing, right? And so this view is one that in the Karmakaji tradition, a lot of people kind of like vacillated between in favor of. So the quote unquote opposite of the Shengtong view is the Rangtong view, right? Where mind is empty, full stop, period.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So what's interesting is it's a little hard to tell where Gampopa stood on the issue, and depending on what source texts you read, some people will say that he was less of a proponent of it and less enthused by it. But I would argue, because of his Dzogchen practice and the Karma Nintik, that he may have publicly said one thing and privately held another view. So there was a very interesting time, because Dolpopa, Lonchampa, Rangjung Dorje all coexisting at the same time. Quite a dynamic and intense combination. Imagine the dinner parties they must have had.
I remember now, I've heard those terms. That's the debate between Galupa and Kagyu, eternalism versus nihilism, and how you ultimately describe emptiness. I'm not being clear, but
Yeah, in a nutshell, it kind of boils down to this. And it's not always Geluk Kaju, because there have been some Kajupas who are Rangtong, in approach. The real biased jerk in me says that if you do a lot of meditation practice, you probably are a Shangtongpa. If you do a lot of study, you're probably a Rangtongpa. But that's just, somebody would probably clobber me for saying that. But I guess I just said it and it was recorded. So
but that's more shocked tongue than I realized then.
maybe.
With a Galupa guru, go me. But so you just said something, I'll stop in a second. You just said something very important. So in some way, and you mentioned this in your newsletter about your retreat center, that a dark retreat is particularly nourishing wisdom and awareness.
Yes, and though, from the way I understand it, the Kala Chakra dark retreat practice has a different tonal approach to the Dzogchen dark retreat practice, in the sense that the tonal difference is this: that in the Kala Chakra Tantra dark retreat, it is used as a way of showing that appearances do not exist, because you have these visual phenomenon, and because, well, I'm in the dark, where does this stuff come from? Therefore, appearance is unreliable, right? Which is not bad. It's very similar in a way to the practice of illusory body, right? But it's also interesting that they preference that, because illusory body comes from the Guru Samaya Tantra, which is also another very kind of, Gelugpa relied upon scripture. And also both of them are Father Tantra. So it's very, very much like that. I would make the argument that within the practice of Dzogchen, the dark retreat experience is more kind of, Magyu or Mother Tantra oriented. And the kind of, point of that is to be able to actually better understand Rigpa, like the Rigpa experience. So even though they both have dark retreat, and even though, definitely the parsing out the differences is really like, at this point, splitting some very fine hairs. It is interesting that both traditions use this sensory deprivation as part of the deepening of their practice.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Nice geeking out. Now I'll go practice.
Good. Okay, good. Richard, your hand is raised.
Yeah, something came up for me again when you were talking about the relative and absolute. And it was that there seems to be this common thread of various levels of kind of, to sound like a geek, sort of dualistic epistemology that runs through Vajrayana Buddhism. Relative and absolute being one of the most kind of easily accessible expressions of it. And then you have appearance, emptiness, and, empty cognizance and compassion and emptiness. And, there are more versions of this. And it just struck me, and this is a question, one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental problem that we're trying to address is dualism. It's our biggest obstacle to realization, it seems to me. And what I want to know is, are these different ways of sort of uniting two in one, to put it crudely, ways of undercutting the fundamental dualism that is our biggest problem? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the way what I'm hearing the question essentially is the undercutting of dualism, I mean, is that basically the practice, right? The essence of the practice.
Yeah, I mean, are these ways of talking about the nature of things statements of how things are, or a way of unifying and thus undercutting our dualistic tendencies? So when you do deity practice, for example, you're dealing constantly with appearance emptiness, right? Manifestation, dissolution, manifestation, dissolution. There's okay. I've said enough.
No. I mean, I didn't mean it like that. I would think I was just nodding because I like hearing your question. So, like the way I would say this is, there is no existence of, basically, the difference or the distinguishing between ultimate and relative truth is situationally located in samsara, right? It's situationally located in samsara because there's still, as you point out, this kind of like, not freak out, but this kind of, there's everything happening, in the relative world, as it were, around us, which is, yes, true to our, apparent eyes. And then there's, the ultimate nature of all things. This is still a samsaric location, right? So I think that when, let's put it this way, when we're resting directly into the Rigpa state fully, there is no possibility of division between all of these, and we just dissolve into this experience of conceptlessness, existence that is free from division, free from habituation, this place of kind of, what we might call maximal freedom, in that really nothing is there and everything is still apparent, right? That the essencelessness of everything is apparent. What makes the discussion of Mahamudra and Hatha Yoga in the most like completion oriented, or fullness oriented location difficult within the context of Buddhism itself is that we're often doing this from the perspective of a Mahayana kind of point of orientation around the two truths, or even a Theravadan, location, right? The logic, in my experience, it's not equal in all three traditions, right? And this is not to say any tradition is better than the other. Each tradition has particular viewpoints and assumptions. And Mahamudra and Hatha Yoga, because they're inherently non-conceptual, are basically like trying to parse out the difference between a fully clear glass of water and a fully clear crystal ball, right? The qualities outside of the wetness, right? Like the qualities of temperature might be the same, the qualities of clarity might be the same, right? but being, they become very hard to fully understand, and might not actually even be relatable from the perspective of, Tantrayana, the Theravadan, the Mahayana tradition and the Theravadan tradition, because it exists, quote unquote, outside of all of them, right? So this kind of tension, it's almost like, forgive me for saying this, but like an erotic tension between ultimate and relative, right? Or between appearance and emptiness, right? Why is that important? It's important because that compels us to experientially find out for ourselves what this whole thing is about, right? And that moves us eventually, into this non-dual state. So ultimately, and I don't mean ultimately from the standpoint of the ultimate nature of things, but from the Hatha Yoga and Mahamudra standpoint, there is no relative truth, right? And also from that perspective, there is no ultimate truth either, because it's just one particular experience, which is nowness, isness, beingness. That's the business, right? Like that's what's up, that's what's happening, that's the only thing that's happening, right? And when we're happening in that fullness, we're happening beyond any kind of designation of any particular thing, and everything is happening in that way, right? So I think that this is a good question, because it highlights what we might consider the possibility of a much larger problem of using, bringing the Mahayana, philosophical system to a non-dual fight. The non-dual fight is really, this experience of Rigpa, or Dharmakaya / Dharmadhatu, automatically, like instantaneously. And so to bring these conceptual designations of ultimate and relative, of course, there's going to be labeling upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, listening to you talk, I found myself taking it a step further, and if in this non-dual state of Rigpa, for example, there remains, and must always remain, as I understand it, a awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yes. This is where it connects to the Shangtan view. Yeah.
So then that gets framed, and this may be a linguistic issue, I don't know, but it gets framed again as awareness emptiness, or empty cognizance. There remains this kind of sense of both emptiness and cognizance. And what I'm seeing is a sort of thread, and it's not a critique at all of dualism per se. It's just really interesting that we seem almost unable to completely break away from the idea of having an awareness entity, if you like, and the context within which that awareness takes place.
Well,
and maybe it's just because complete unconsciousness, like when you have your tooth pulled out and get given a massive dose of ketamine, for example, there's nothing at all. There's 1 minute you're awake and the next minute you're awake.
Hey, dear Richard, may I interrupt you just very briefly? Just because I want to honor, we've gone past time, and so I'm happy to stick around.
Oh, okay,
but
sure.
also want to give respect people's time. Thank you so much for joining, and feel free to stay if you'd like, but if you'd like to leave, be free to do so as well.
Thanks,
It's great
Eric.
to practice with all of you. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to say this was such a beautiful blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha. Yeah.
Okay, we can stop.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say one thing, just because I think it's worth considering. So I agree with your point that, and this might just be a human thing, right? That
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, really.
yeah, because when So like, this is why we find these terms simultaneity and co-emergence, you know, as descriptors. Empty and aware, right? Now, when you're in that experience, and I know you've been in this experience, I'm going to call you out. So when we are in this experience of Rigpa, which is empty and aware, in that moment of experience, is it two things or is it one? You know, is the use of yoking these two descriptors together a function of being human, right? Or human communication? It is like this and this and this, right? Because what happens if you use 4 words? Then it becomes, you know, a different, you know, it's still dualistic in a particular way, right? Or 3 words or 7 words or 5 words, right? So I will still make the argument. I agree 100%. There's this human flaw, this human limitation, the human stain. And so we have the human stain problem. And the thing that exacerbates this problem is that we still also have this ability to experience it. You know, and this, I think, is what the Buddha was getting at when he was saying, or they were saying, that I can't, you know, and this is why, you know, they were quiet when they first got enlightened. I was like, oh shit, like, how do I express this, right? This was something that the Buddha, you know, underwent. So there's that thing. And then there's the other piece where, you know, the Buddha said, apparently, like, you know, I can't do this for you, like, you have to do this, right? So I think some of this is the process of us experientially going all the way, right? And then what becomes, and you see this, Rangjung Dorje does this very well, and Longchenpa does this very well. These two people of the same time period, they can describe this so clearly, right? And then there is the like messed up human limitation of making everything a binary. And it's not just in the Buddhist tradition, right? Obviously we see this in Abrahamic faith traditions. We see this as it's this and that. Like, so what is that? Like, you know, and again, this is like, you know, what I mean about like the erotic tension. There's something about that dynamic of tension that I think is also procedural and situationally important for the practitioner to hear, because it's like, oh, it's not just this one thing, it's this other thing. And how do these relate? They relate in a way that spiritually turns me on a little bit. Like I'm like, wow. And it causes an inductive shift into something other than what we're normally used to, you know, which is the heavy binary.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's manifest in the iconography, eh? The
Exactly.
Yapio iconography just is very much an expression
Yeah.
of that. And I think the thing that I found led me to this also was, since you've called me out about it, sitting in the dark and thinking, well, this is all very well, but what happens when this body deconstructs? How much of this is a product of my sort of psychophysiology, and when the elements dissolve one into the other, what is the nature of this apparent dualism of awareness, emptiness? Does it just become emptiness? Is this very, very subtle, and it is subtle,
Sure.
dualism? Is it a function of physiology, brain, nervous system, whatever you want to call it? Or no, it's just a question that sort of hangs in the air, you know, however deep in you might go, you're still
Well, yeah, and so I think here, I mean, this is where this kind of Sem and Rigpa split come up, right? Where there is a for, I don't know, I'm not going to use the right word, but there's a relational difference between Sem and Rigpa, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and so Rigpa is primordially pure, timeless, spacious awareness, full stop. Sem is, we don't even have to go so far as to begin to say, oh, it's relative mind, right? But it bubbles, right? It bubbles, it reflects, it, you know, it's like a slightly chatty thing, right? Like highly, not highly reactive, but reacts to touch, right? Reacts to poking, prodding, etc. Right? So as we die, right, the Sem piece fades, 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 till we just have Rigpa. This like child and mother clear light kind of metaphor is about the recognition of the Rigpa state, right? And this can happen in a couple of different ways and a couple of different times. It can happen when Sem and Rigpa are situated, you know, kind of closely to one another. And then there's this, you know, it's that contrast between the two that is like, you know, helps point this out. But then the other way is when, you know, Sem and all of the conditioning of mind, right? Conditioning meaning spatial relationships, every kind of reactivity, every kind of classification, as that begins to dissolve, then just Rigpa is left to be experienced as well. And then this experience of Rigpa is, basically like the awakened state, right? And then what will cause, the kind of re-entry into the realm of, Nirmanakayas, like rebirth, is determined by karma, So the thing about, so there is still a slight dualism between, when there's the experience of Sem and Rigpa occurring at the same time, right? But when Rigpa itself is just beheld, right? This is this kind of self-reflective awareness, right? That's all there is. And then that is this, mind of clear light. And the mind of clear light is this, Dharmakaya experience. Samanta Bhadra, Samanta Bhadri, like, in union, in that kind of way. Or Samanta Bhadra, Samanta Bhadra, Samanta Bhadri, Samanta Bhadri, or, we need to do some better work with, the iconography and the language. But so that's what that, is getting at.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, a question is not necessarily accompanied by an answer either, is it? I mean, a question
100%,
is valid in and of itself, and
yes,
that's sort of what I was trying to get at, really. I think it just hangs in the air, I mean, when you talk about Rigpa being perceived, that's the question is always there. So, what's perceiving this? What the hey is going on here, basically? And that it sort of ends there for me. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes. Well, we got to get you on another retreat.
Anyway, thank you, Justin, for
Thank
engaging
you.
so long.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here, and maybe we can just very quickly dedicate the merit to all beings that are passing through the Bardo right now. There's a Kiwi musician I know, Hamish Kilgour, who is in the Bardo state right now. So may all Bardo beings be able to rest freely and naturally in the experience of liberated awareness, may all beings in the Bardo state be able to rearise in such a way as they can benefit all sentient beings, including us. Take very good care, everybody.
Thank
Oh,
you. And thank you, Eric. Love
yeah.
your question, Richard. Learned a lot.
Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.